Welcome to the show, everybody. I want to remind all of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On YouTube, it's Film Talk Radio. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Adrian Pijoan, and he is a recipient of one of the Santa Fe Film Institute's recent grants and a filmmaker living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about receiving the grant, the project you applied with, and what does our audience need to know?
Yeah, so it was really cool. I received the grant kind of at the perfect time as I was sort of transitioning more into more traditional filmmaking. My background is really in art and experimental video, and then really in like 2022, I started making more sort of normal narrative films. And I received the grant in 2023 at the same time that I got a little bit of other funding from the city of Albuquerque and joined this really awesome independent film collective in Albuquerque called Dust Wave. And all these things sort of came together. And this was actually the SFFI grant was the first one that I got and sort of like got me started on this project and feeling good about doing it. And then all these other things just lined up right away. And we managed to make this film last year. And it was the biggest project, biggest crew that I've had. So it was great. Like just kind of, I felt like it was like at the perfect moment to unlock all these other things that happened. The film itself is called Pandora's Greenhouse. I was actually looking at the concept that I applied with back in 2023, and it's very similar, but it's interesting to see how it transitioned over time. It always was a kind of like cosmic horror, botanical themed film, transitioned into more of a sort of cosmic horror, botanical pseudo documentary. But yeah, so that's the sort
A
of gist of the
cosmic horror botanical pseudo documentary?
yeah, exactly. Um, so I've always been really into like sort of fringe culture and the occult stuff like UFOs and Bigfoot and things in that sort of realm. And I was really into this book called The Secret Life of Plants, um, which I don't know if you've come across this before. It's from the 70s. It's about people who were doing like experiments into telepathically communicating with plants, very 70s. Either for research purposes or like the government had some interest in this, is like maybe using plants to spy. Uh, there's this really one of my favorite experiments they do is they have like a plant witness a crime and then see if it can identify the murderer or the murderer. They murder a plant in front of the plant and they hook them up to like basically lie detector machines and look at the electrical feedback. So I've been really interested in this subject, but I'm also a person that lives in 2025 and not in the 70s, and because of that, I have a lot of anxiety about like climate change and all those things. So I thought it'd be interesting to sort of inject this sort of climate catastrophe, cosmic horror aspect into this world of like 70s occult experiments with plants.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so, was it exciting hearing that you were a recipient of the grant? And you were already familiar with the Santa Fe Film Institute, I imagine?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said before, it's just part of it is the funding and part of it is just having like knowing that people are excited about your idea. Um, it just like gives you, I mean, making a film is super hard. So just having any kind of support, whether that is, funding to do the thing or just like people being like, hey, this is a good idea and you should go through all of the like, the trials and difficulty of making a film. To get this idea out there.
Well, it sounds like it increased your confidence in the project, but it
Yeah,
did it also help legitimize it in the eyes of people you're presenting it to and people you're hiring for it?
I think so. I think yeah. I mean, having the yeah, having that support. I don't think I knew when I applied to the other grant because I heard it back about that one shortly after this one. So I didn't have that like I didn't have this grant to sort of put into like, hey, we already have, support from the Santa Fe Film Institute. But I think it helped further along the line getting people on board for the project because everything we do in Dustwave, like we're all like very micro budget, very independent, and so it is sometimes hard to get the momentum going. And so yeah, having that legitimacy, having that little bit of funding helps a lot. And when because we're always sort of uh, you know negotiating with people and trying to get spaces rented for cheap or props rented for cheap, right? Because we are operating at like super micro budget level. So yeah, having any sort of legitimacy to the projects is super helpful.
And you finished shooting? It's already in the can. What is the status of the movie now?
Yeah, so it is. We have a rough cut together, and we are just finishing up a few things. I just applied for a little bit more funding for some things that we want to do in post. We actually did all, and this was something that I was really excited about. We did all of um, the cosmic horror stuff, practical effects. I actually built like a 7 foot tall monster puppet that we had three puppeteers inside of operating, um, which was not something I'd done before, but always really wanted to do. I'm a big fan of like 80s horror and like John Carpenter's The Thing is one of my all-time favorite movies. So it's like practical creature effects, a lot of like reverse shot stuff of like tentacles wrapping around things and um so that stuff is all done. Like we don't have to do any effects. We did have an idea because it's sort of presented with this wrapper of being like a found 1970s experimental documentary. We had this idea of doing like a film out transfer, uh, but that is super expensive. So we're waiting to hear back from a grant that I applied for to see if we'll have funding to do the film transfer.
Well, and if some of our listeners wanted to support that, how could they get in touch?
Oh, well, best way to get in touch with me is probably through just like email or Instagram. We haven't done like a crowdfunding for it or anything. Um, it's my
So, like, is there an Instagram address or an email that you want to share on the air?
Yeah, so my Instagram is just my name. It's just Adrian underscore Pijoan. So it should be in the title of the video. Always a tough one to spell, but
Oh,
um,
well, it'll be in the description under the video. If you're listening on KTRC, then you can also, um, let's see, what's the email?
it's also just my name.
Oh, okay.
Though we could also do the dust. We can always get so again like Dustwave is
No,
really
no,
cool.
oh yeah, or you can find it on Dustwave. But do you want to do a quick spelling? I don't think anyone will mind hearing how to spell
Yeah,
Pigeon.
yeah. So my email is AMPIJOAN@gmail.com.
Now, what's the title of the film? Can you remind us?
Pandora's Greenhouse.
And it's already shot. You're in the process of editing. What are some of the plans for the film once it's finished? What would you like to see happen for it?
I would love to get it into some festivals. So again, my background is in art. So every film that I've made in the past has been designed for gallery exhibition. I've done a few festivals, but mostly my films have been shown in art galleries. So I'm really excited. This is like the most traditional, just sort of standard narrative film that I've done, and I'm really excited to try to, get it out there to some festivals, go to some festivals, travel around with it.
And did you receive, I know you got the grant from the Albuquerque group or the city of Albuquerque. Were there any people who supported you along the way, not necessarily financially, but maybe in a mentor role or anything like that that you want to shout out to?
Yeah, definitely just all of Dustwave. I mean, Dustwave, they sort of found me, which is kind of the dream. Like they had just seen my work around town. Specifically one of those films I made that sh was in a bunch of different gallery shows, which was this kind of experimental like romantic Bigfoot film that I made, and called Slow Dance. And Alonso Indocochea, who's one of the founders of Dustwave, had just seen my work around town and approached me just at an opening that I had some work in. And then, and people, like, when you're in any kind of public facing role, like an artist or filmmaker, or whatever, like people come up to you and tell you that they're, whatever. And you're like, okay, man, cool. Like maybe this is real, maybe it's not. But he followed up, and I got to learn more about Dustwave, and they're really amazing. They
Adrian, what materials did you use to fashion the puppet?
So it had like a this is one of those fun things where I just like I had no I like I've made a lot of stuff as an artist, but I've never made a monster puppet before that somebody could be inside of. So it was kind of going as I making it up as I went. And so I built like a frame out of 2x4s that the puppeteers could be inside of. And then it had like cardboard on the outside of that, just for structure basically. And then a lot of like spray foam, like that spray insulation that you can get at Home Depot, which I then airbrushed to paint it. And then it had like a like an eye that we could move around. Like it had a big eye socket and eye we could move around. That was just like a styrofoam ball that I painted. And then very much influenced by The Thing and sort of Lovecraftian horror, had a lot of tentacles.
And
Uh,
that's the John Carpenter thing, not the.
yeah. Though in the original, The Thing is a plant monster, so it's got a little bit of both. Um, and the tentacles, I think, were the smaller ones were like pantyhose stuffed with cotton batting and covered in latex, and then the big ones were pool noodles, then also covered in cotton batting and like nylon stockings and latex. Uh, very gross looking. And then I made like 15 gallons of like basically ectoplasm. Like I found on some forum the recipe for the ectoplasm from Ghostbusters
Which
and
is a
made like
slime for
yeah, just like slime, like
non-Ghostbusters.
colorless, like super viscous, gnarly slime, and we just coated the whole thing so it's just oozing and dripping and thrashing around. Uh,
And were there any surprises on how the slime would read on camera, or were you able to get what you wanted right away?
I think the slime read well. I actually the surprise is that I was like so worried the whole time that we didn't have enough. So I made three 5 gallon buckets full of this stuff. And we just like didn't use that much because it started like once we started like operating the puppet, like it was just like flying around and like it was just like it was already getting sort of difficult to operate in there because there was so much slime on everything. I was ready to just like dump bucket after bucket of slime on this thing, but the practical aspect and like not wanting to get slime on the camera. And it's actually a food product that you make it out of, so the slime was technically edible. You wouldn't want to eat it, but it wasn't gonna, if it got in somebody's mouth, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But it was gross. I guess that was, I mean, that's not really a surprise, but definitely if you want to make like a goopy gloppy practical effect monster, be prepared for the effects of all the goop and glop everywhere.
And it can double as gruel if your team is hungry.
Yeah.
So, God, that sounds really fun. Did you have a very big team on the movie? Did you have a casting director? Where did you find everybody? How did that all come together?
Yeah, so a lot of our crew, I think all of our crew are just members of Dustwave, this independent film collective. I actually did the casting, which I had never done before, and it is a exhausting and very involved process. It was super interesting and fun. We went through the full, we did self-tape auditions and then in-person callbacks. Ton of fun. I don't know if I was prepared for the quantity of emailing that was going to involve as I was trying to, construct the puppet and get everything else ready to film. But yeah, so I had a full crew. It was my first time. I'd worked with a sort of skeleton crew on previous projects, but this was the first project where I had like a full crew. Um, and it was great. I mean, I'm super thankful to everyone who worked on this film, and um, I don't think it would be anywhere near what it is without all the contributions from everyone uh, involved in it.
So, on the next one, do you think you'll reach out to a casting company? It sounds like that was a little more than you were expecting.
Yeah, I might. I mean, I really enjoyed the process. It would either be that or just leaving. Like, I don't think I didn't budget the amount of time. I mean, that's just kind of how these things go too, though, is like I had this window where Dustwave sort of said, "Hey, we want to produce this thing and we want to produce it in August," and this was in June, so we had a very short pre-production window. But when someone says they want to produce your film, you don't say, "Hey, man, could we do it a little later?" You say, "All right, we're doing it," and you sort of figure it out whether you're going to, maybe sleep a little less than usual or something in the process of getting it done.
And
But yeah, I
yeah.
think also just having casting director being able to get the like a broader net in terms of reaching out to actors because it is also hard to figure out how to get actors. I mean, there's so many Facebook groups and newsletters and stuff, and trying to get onto everything, get it out there everywhere is a lot of work in and of itself.
Was the New Mexico Film Office at all supportive?
We didn't reach out to the film office, but yeah.
And are you aware of their tax credit? You can get 25% back.
We are, and so this year we're working on Dustwave is working on a project that has a little bit of a larger budget, and so for the first time, so we've only been around for about 3 years, and because we are so micro budget and sort of just figuring it out as we go, and people from a lot of different backgrounds too. So there are some people that are industry people, but there's people like me who come from more of the art world. There's people who come from all kinds of backgrounds. So this year feels 2025 feels like the year where we're really organizing a bit more. And so this year we're doing the tax credit. And I actually volunteered to be the one to work on that. Which I know it's a lot of paperwork, but that is an
Well,
awesome program that we have here. So
if I understand correctly, if you did keep track of your spending on the film that's already complete, you can still receive the tax credit from the film office. But
oh
yeah, talk to Rochelle or Steve or someone at the film office
yeah.
and let them know your situation and that the movie is complete, but you'd still like to apply for the tax credit, and
Okay.
that could be helpful. Albuquerque Film Collective called Dustwave has since gotten involved, and the film is in the can. They're looking for finishing funds. Adrian, you've mentioned Dustwave a little bit. Let's hear more about them.
Yeah, so Dustway, we are a independent film collective here in Albuquerque. We have 40 some members. I think just shy of 50 after joining a movie called Movie Monsters, which was a kaiju film. And so like a Godzilla type movie. And I got involved in that. It was like a lizard Godzilla type person fighting like a robot guy. I built the robot costume for that. And we built like a whole cardboard city for them to destroy. Just a ton of fun.
Okay, so let's hear about the robot costume. I really enjoyed hearing about the monster costume for Pandora's greenhouse. So please tell me,
Yeah.
how did you build this robot costume?
I built it out of, oh, I'm trying to remember the name of the material. It's like that foam that like people put down in like a gym on the floor, like those foam tiles. A lot of cosplayers make stuff out of this. Like if you ever see like uh, people at like a, you know, whatever kind of convention and they're wearing like armor, it's usually made out of this foam stuff because it's easy to cut and easy. You can kind of form it and then use a heat gun to have it keep its shape. And so I did that, and I'd never worked with it before. This is a theme with my work too. Like I love just trying new stuff, and I think that's part of like having a background in art too. Is like I like to try new stuff, and I'm like, even if I don't know how to do it, I feel like I'll figure it out. Um, I found a template for like a medieval armor uh, costume, and then pulled the templates. Actually, I printed them out and then drew on them to make it sort of more robotic. And then, yeah, just like cut and molded this foam to make like almost like a Voltron kind of thing with like a V, uh, like chest piece and some gauntlets and like uh,
And for
like
those of
shin.
you who don't remember Voltron, it's now called Power Rangers.
Yeah. And yeah, that was super fun. The film itself is about the sort of the idea is that it's like a Godzilla type movie and the shoot is going poorly, and then the two actors get into like an actual fist fight in their costumes. So I didn't have to make a helmet, which was nice because making helmets is hard. I've done it before. Um, because
Why is it, yeah. Why is it hard to make a helmet?
it's just harder to like it's like the head is just complicated. It's hard to make something. It's got to go all the way around, and like the actor has to be able to see out of it and like breathe out of it well and like fit on their head without like also like making it too big and it does this. So I made a film in 2022 that I mentioned that my sort of romantic Bigfoot film, which also had a Mothman costume in it, and I made the Mothman hat this way basically, whereas it was like a helmet with then fur on the outside and two like red lights for the eyes and then like feathers for the moth antenna. Um, and that was one of the hardest parts of all the costumes that I made for that. So I was grateful to not have to make a helmet for the robot. But yeah, it was like super bright colored, like very Power Rangers aesthetic. And that was the first Dust Wave thing I worked on. And then during the actual shoot, I did a few different roles. Like we have definitely like there's people who are, you know, the DP or whatever, but then everybody else, like we're very into letting people try roles that they're interested in, especially in like a, you know, first AC or like a second AC role, right? Like if you're just interested in learning more about camera or something, right? So I got to just like try out a few different things during that shoot. Um, so yeah, that and then from there I have a writers group that meets every 2 weeks. And so I got the Santa Fe Film Institute grant and a little bit of funding from the city of Albuquerque, and I started writing this screenplay. And actually the first time I showed it to anybody was at that writers group. Um, and from there was where Dustwave was like, yeah, we want to produce this thing. Like basically during the writers group, um, which I hope is a testament to the quality of my writing. But and a few projects have that we've produced have come about that way, where basically someone has shown a really strong piece of writing in the writers group, and then it's just like, let's make this thing. Um, yeah, and then I think they've made like 22 movies in the last 3 years. It's been like a real like just
And these are
produce
short films.
all shorts. Yeah, Pandora's Greenhouse is a short as well. We're hoping in 2025 our goal is to make a feature, and that's sort of where we're starting to look at the tax credit and all these other things as well.
So, do you consider it a proof of concept, or is it a short film that stands on its own?
It stands on its own. These are themes that I've worked with quite a bit. I actually, before going to art school, I actually got my undergraduate degree in botany. So I'm like super interested in the plant world and I love horror. So I wanted to make like a plant horror for years. I have so many more ideas for this project. I think it could, be expanded, but it also is very much, its own standalone thing. Um, there's something else I wanted to say about that.
Go ahead.
I can't remember. It slipped my mind. It'll come back.
So I think you've got an exciting thing going on. You've got this writers group meets twice a week. You've now got a film collective that you've joined, and you're wearing a lot of different hats, it sounds like, on some of these.
Yeah.
Also doing builds, also writing and directing. Who are some of your influences when it comes to making movies?
Oh. Um, well, it's funny because it's like, do I want to go like filmmakers that I really admire, or like filmmakers that I feel like are all that practical effects stuff, all the Stan Winston monsters, and my stuff is much more lo-fi and made of materials you can get at Home Depot. But I do dream of learning more of that sort of practical effects and puppetry stuff coming from that Stan Winston world. And with like that's something I really admire and want to do more of. I know it's not technically, he's not a filmmaker, but within the film world. I also have a lot of love for like sort of outsider filmmakers who do everything themselves. The sort of Neil Breens of this world, even though like the films are terrible, I just love the ethos of filmmakers who are just like, I'm gonna make this crazy idea no matter what. Um, uh, I'm trying to think of like my favorite uh, films, and um, this is one of those things I always blank on in the moment.
And some of the artists that have influenced you, since I know you're an art student as well. As far as plant horror, are you familiar with both Little Shop of Horrors films? And of course, there's a
Of
Broadway
course.
musical.
Yeah, I hadn't seen them since I was a kid. I didn't watch them in preparation for this because I didn't want to be like too worried about whether I was like, I feel like this is a very different project because it is, yeah, it has this sort of like climate change theme, but also it has like the monster itself is very gross and very much the Thing influenced. But yeah, I actually really want to go back and rewatch the Little Shop of Horror now that we've wrapped on filming, and I feel like I can just enjoy it instead of like worrying about similarities or differences, or it being a influence in my ear while I'm working on this. Trying to think of other good plant horrors. There's a great Goosebumps book. I grew up as like a Goosebumps kid in the 90s. That is a botanical horror, and they actually in the TV show they made an episode of it that I saw on TV as a kid. So that's definitely an influence in there.
Adrian, it's been such a fun show, and I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. You've got a film collective backing you now, and also received some funds from the city of Albuquerque. Now, tell me a little bit about yourself as a writer director, and what do you really hope to become? What are you looking to accomplish? What kind of stories are you trying to tell?
Yeah, so the writer part is interesting. I all through high school thought that what I wanted to do was be a writer. I used to write short stories and submit them to competitions. And then in college, I kind of moved away from that. Ended up studying botany, as I mentioned before. So it's been really exciting to come back into creative writing and not just, you know, professional writing or journaling or whatever. And coming back to this thing that I'd always considered myself. In terms of themes, like I love stuff like this. I mean, something I love about horror and sort of B horror films, which this is maybe more in that realm, is that there is this sort of mixture of the campy aesthetics and very serious themes. And for me, that's something that works really well as a way of like, I don't want to just bum people out talking about climate change or like, the fires going on in LA right now or things like that. But I think through presenting it through horror and creatures, like you can have these conversations and maybe access them in a different way. And that's something that really excites me as a writer and something that I am continuing to explore in some of the new uh, screenplays that I'm working on right now. This was my first time, not my first time directing, but my first time directing with a full size crew. So I'd worked with just a handful of actors and a couple camera people before, but this was the first time where I was in a room with 20 people looking at me, and wanting to know, you know, things from me. Uh, I I teach at UNM, in the art department, so I am used to sort of managing a group of people. I didn't know how directing was going to go. I received a very nice compliment from my assistant director when we were done, who's much more of a film world person, has been on a lot of different sets in the industry. Um, and she told me that it was really nice to work with me because I really knew what I wanted, which I think might come from the art background. Like I did, when I go into a project, I have a very clear sort of concept and message that I want to get across with it, and I know what I want things to look like. So, and I'm used to communicating that through constructing an exhibition or whatever. So I think the skills that I had already translated well. I mean, I don't really know. I didn't direct myself, so I think the work will just have to speak for itself. But I liked it. I enjoyed. I mean, there's nothing better for me than working with skilled people and just being able to sort of like get their input on something. You tell them what I want something to look like, get their input, and then sort of meet between those things and to create the best version of what the thing can be. Like, was a really fun process for me.
That's a very high compliment that you knew exactly what you wanted. That's like what an like they'll interview an actor about Stanley Kubrick and they'll say he did this many shots, but he knew exactly what he wanted. So my question is, how do you know what you want?
Knowing the aesthetic that I'm going for and knowing what I want to communicate with the work. And knowing how that moment of the work communicates the thing that allows the full message to come across. And this is something that I feel like is more common maybe in art. I'm not sure, but like you don't make a work of art unless you know what you want it to say. Like you don't just like I just want to make a painting. It's like, well, what do you want the painting to be about? What do you want? What do you want to communicate with this work? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say about the world that we live in and your experience of it? And you become very used to answering those questions as an artist. I don't know that every time someone writes a screenplay, they have that, like that's their first thought of like, what am I trying to communicate with this? Um, I don't know. Is that
No, that's good. I mean, I think a lot of what you're describing is artistic vision. Seems like you have quite a bit of that. Is there anything you want to say about artistic vision before we move on?
I just think, and this is, something that I tell my students a lot is that like your experiences of the world and the world that you live in are sort of the most interesting thing, right? I mean, it's you look back at like great art from the past, and a lot of what's interesting about it is that this person is conveying something about the moment that they lived in, right? And from their perspective of it. Um, and I think sometimes people who are starting out might not think that's interesting necessarily because they want to maybe say some sort of like grand thing about the whole universe or some kind of like big truth, but like smaller truth just about like your lived experience in this moment of time and in 2025, like that is sort of what will be the most interesting to both people now and people in the future, right? Because it's the world seen through your eyes.
What is your advice to someone wanting to get started in movie making?
I think not getting caught up in feeling like you have to make your magnum opus as your first thing, right? You gotta make something, and the first thing you make will probably won't be the best thing that you ever make. But you got to get it out. You got to learn lessons. You got to, when I first started, this is my first narrative short, but it's not my first film or video. And when I started making video as an artist, I had a goal of making a video every week. And I didn't meet that goal, and these were smaller, shorter projects, a lot of like just uh, quick experimental things, but I made dozens of videos and I learned a lot of stuff in the process of doing that. And a lot of it wasn't very good. A lot of it I've not never shown to anybody. Some of it is on YouTube. But yeah, it's just the only way to learn is by doing. And I think some people get caught up with like, I have, this epic idea for the next like big superhero movie and it's going to cost $40 million to make. And like, that's the only thing I want to make. And it's like, but you can't make that. So you got to make something else before you can make that. Right. And get a lot of the mistakes out. So the advice is just to just do it, just figure it out. Like film it on your phone, like do whatever you can to just get stuff into the world. And that's how you'll end up meeting the people that can help you create those more ambitious projects as well.
Well, I think you're becoming quite a leader and you've made some friends along the way. Do you want to say anything about good writing and bad writing? I know in film it's a lot of showing rather than telling. Do you have any thoughts on the writing process or advice to writers?
I have advice. This is advice. This is my own hard learning process from this film, is that when you are writing for film, as opposed to writing a short story or whatever, you really need to think about where everybody's going to be in in the scene. Like you should be thinking about blocking while you're writing, because there was a scene where I was not considering that, and fortunately, my DP and my AD came to me and were like, we got to figure out the blocking in the scene because it's not in the script. So, um, yeah, I mean, it is like you're writing for this visual medium. So you have to like be thinking about and that doesn't mean that you need to storyboard the whole thing or whatever, but do be thinking about how things look all the time because you will have to eventually answer that question. Assuming that you're writing and then directing. I guess if you're writing and then just sending it off to somebody else, you might not. But I think strong screenwriting has that in it, and you can picture the blocking of every scene clearly through the way that the scene is described.
Adrian, that's pretty much a show. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No, I'm just super excited to get this thing out into the world. Hopefully we get some finishing funds. If not, we're gonna finish it either way. So hopefully it will be Pandora's Greenhouse will be out sometime this spring, hopefully getting into some festivals. So if you see it out there somewhere, come check it out, come say hi. Um, I'm really excited about this project and everything else that's on the horizon.
And they can find you at the Dust Wave website if somebody wants to support the project.
Yeah, so we're all if it's just dustwave.xyz and there are profiles of all the members. So I'm on there with links to my socials. That's probably actually the easiest way to find me.
Everybody, this was Adrian Pijoan. The film is Pandora's Greenhouse. Please check it out, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.